What's up, Bubba Lovers? Yesterday, one of my favorite bands, King Gizzard, announced that they were going to give concerts right here in Australia. And ticket sales opened just at 10 a.m. here, local time, in Australia. And guess who just got tickets to see King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard in Melbourne? Woo!
What's up, Bubba Lovers? So, before I start, two important things. First, I'm going to base these lessons mostly on the book The Ecology of Fire by Robert Whelan. And second, fire ecology is an immensely complicated subject, one that is impossible to explain from all angles in my short lessons. So, just to make it clear, my intention is not to give like an all-encompassing thesis on fire ecology, that's just flat out impossible. But my lessons will mainly serve to put the wildfires that are happening in the world today in a more natural and ecological context. Okay. Last time, we talked about the carbon cycle. So, how does that fit into wildfires and fire ecology? Well, at its core, a fire is a mechanism to recycle nutrients, and this includes carbon. Like we learned in last episode, animals eat plant material and break the organic matter down to carbon dioxide by burning it in their bodies. A wildfire is principally the same process minus the animal bodies, just on a much larger scale and in a much more chaotic fashion. Now, wildfires are very intimidating. For good reason, they're responsible for numerous deaths in animals and humans. In ecology though, a wildfire is a physical disturbance just like any other, like a flood, a storm, or a plague. Any event that is able to drastically change the structure of the system. And needless to say, a fire does this by burning and killing plants, and also by driving away animals or killing them. What sets a fire apart from a drought or a flood though, is how fires are in itself more dependent on the ecosystem than other physical disturbances. Right? A fire exists by burning biomass. We've learned this. So the more biomass there is, the more opportunity exists for a destructive fire. It's one of the fundamental drivers of a wildfire, and that's what I want to delve into today. A wildfire is dependent on many conditions, but there are four fundamental drivers that underlie one. The first is what we just talked about: fuel. Like I said, the more biomass is available to burn, the more destructive a fire is. But if you reason backwards, if there is no fuel, then there can be no fire. So the first driver is fuel. Secondly, the condition of the fuel is important. We are talking about wildfires, and the main fuel in a wildfire is the vegetation. And the most important fuel characteristic is the humidity or the dryness. Think of how a firefighter would put out a fire, right? More water equals less fire. And similarly, plants that are more humid will be at a lower risk of burning than dried out plants. Which ties into the third condition. How does fuel dry out? In other words, what makes one plant drier than the other? Now, you know that a plant uses water for photosynthesis, right? That's the way water is lost in the plant. And true as this may be, this is by far not how most water escapes a plant. No, almost 99% of water is lost through evaporation, which the plant does in response to high temperatures. So in this case, it's about the external weather conditions that increase the risk of a fire. And finally, last but definitely not least, you can have all the biomass in the world, 24 hours a day, tropical summer weather with severe droughts, you're still not gonna have a wildfire unless you have a source of ignition. So the previous factors all determine the risk of a fire happening, but it is the ignition that will cause the actual fire. And in a natural sense, this is often caused by a thunder, but of course, many wildfires are also ignited by human intervention, like arson. And there you have it, the four fundamental drivers of fire: fuel, fuel dryness, fire weather conditions, and ignition.
East Melbourne is situated right between Richmond and the Melbourne Central Business District. It's one of the oldest suburbs of Melbourne, and because of that there are a few old buildings which are worth visiting. And I'm going to show you those right now. But I really want to focus on the main attraction, my favorite place of East Melbourne, which you'll see after that. Welcome to Fitzroy Gardens. This is my favorite place in East Melbourne. So there's actually a suburb up north which is called Fitzroy, so I don't really know why this is called Fitzroy Gardens, but some things are just the way they are, right? Oh yeah, and so Fitzroy Garden is actually pretty big, so I'm just gonna show you 7 highlights of Fitzroy Gardens. There are way more, but you're just gonna have to find out for yourself. By that I mean, of course, you need to come to Melbourne. So this is Captain Cook's cottage, and Captain Cook was a British sailor that's often accredited with the discovery of mainland Australia. So I remember when I was a kid, my mum sometimes used to pack these sweet cakes for me for lunch. They were called Kapitein Cook. They had this parrot in a pirate costume on their brand, and I don't think they exist anymore, so they should really do something about that. But my main point was that I only now realize where they drew the inspiration from. So this is called a dolphin fountain, and I don't really know why. Ah, okay, yeah, makes sense. So if you ever find yourself in The Hague, you can go to Maduro Dam, which is like a miniature park. I went there a couple times as a kid. So apparently here at Fitzroy Gardens, they have a similar thing. I don't really think it fits, but you know, who am I? So that was Fitzroy Gardens, but there is one important last place in East Melbourne that I still need to talk about, where I'm going to take you right now. Here we are. This is Yarra Park, and Yarra Park is home to the Melbourne Cricket Grounds, which will be of more importance later on in the episode.
Hey, guess what? I volunteered for another project, and the fieldwork was done at Starvation Creek, where I was last time for the Forest Geo project. This time around, I took the train. For the first time, I went from Richmond to Heatherdale. If you want to use public transport in Melbourne, you buy a Mikey card, which works similar to an OV chip card. You touch on when you get on, and touch off when you get off. Although I wish it really was that simple.
So the fieldwork I'm about to do today is for Claudia, who is a PhD, with the same supervisor as me. And basically, she made me my pack mule, because I have to bring half of the fieldwork stuff with me.
So what Claudia wants to study is how the brown and the desert stringybark respond to climate change.
Whoa, Stringybarks? Is that like a new strain?
Who's that?
Quick lesson about eucalypts, guys. So there are about 700 species of eucalyptus. How do you keep all of them apart? Well, one of the first things that you can look at is their bark. So some eucalyptus species have a smooth bark, like this one. We call those gum trees. But there are other eucalyptus which we call stringybarks, and they have a more thick and fibrous bark, like this one over here.
So the seeds of these stringybarks are the main diet of the endangered southeastern red-tailed black cockatoo. The development of these seeds is dependent on environmental cues. So for example, if the peak temperature in spring happens relatively early, it is likely that the peak seed production will be early too. Now, the study of how environmental cues influence the events in biological life cycles, like at what time plants start flowering or producing fruit, is what we call phenology. And of course, climate change is changing these environmental cues, and so cause a change in the tree's phenology. Claudia's aim is to evaluate the reproductive stages of these trees and compare them with climate change models, so she can understand how it will influence the food availability for the endangered cockatoos. And one way to assess this is by taking samples of these reproductive stages. So, out in the field, Our goal is to literally collect a branch of one of these Stringybarks. Anyway, this is how to collect a branch. We had a long rope that we want to hook over a branch so we can yank it off. So the rope needs to go over the branch, and for that we used an improvised air pressure gun. We attached a weight at both ends of the rope, filled the gun with air until about 100 bar, aimed, and tried to shoot one end over the branch. Looks something like this.
Fire in a hole.
This wasn't always successful though, these trees are very tall. But once we hooked the rope over the branch, we grabbed both ends, reeled the rope to add some extra tension, and then pulled as hard as we could. And didn't always work out though. Eventually we collected one branch, brought it back to Burnley so that Claudia can now analyze them.
Hello up abovers. So it's Thursday, which means it's a national holiday because we are mourning the Queen today, and because tomorrow it is a state holiday because they're playing the grand finals of the AFL. We actually have a pretty long weekend. But what makes today extra special, next to the very beautiful weather that we're having today, is that I'm going to pick up a guitar from a seller that I found on Gumtree. He lives out in Mooney Ponds, which is somewhere on the outskirts of Melbourne, about 45 minutes bike ride, but at least the weather is really nice for a very long bike ride. So I'll see you when I get there and I'll show you the goods. So after a sweaty bike ride and getting lost a bit on the way here, I finally did manage to make it to Mooney Ponds. So now it's just a matter of calling the seller and picking up my guitar. Funny story, when I talked to the seller on Gumtree, he actually said that the guitar didn't come with a soft case, which is why I brought this duffel bag with me so that I didn't have to bike home with a bare guitar on my back. But when he heard that I actually came by bike, he got me a soft case anyway.
I made my way back to Melbourne along the A60 highway, which went about as well as you'd expect from cycling on a highway, especially with extra carry weight.
So before I go home and show you what my guitar looks like, I had planned to meet some friends over here in Melbourne City because they were going to have a barbecue at this place, Flagstaff Gardens.
The occasion was Claudia's birthday, so of course we ate a Colombian dish called arepas, which are like savory cakes made out of cornmeal that you can fill with anything you like, similar to tortillas I guess. Also, these Australians really take their barbecue seriously. You have these public barbecues everywhere in parks, free to use by anyone.
There she is, guys. She's a beaut, isn't she? As you can see, she's a Stratocaster model, but she's actually not a Fender or a Squier for that matter. She's actually from a knockoff band called SX. But not like that matters because she gets the job done, and for $80, she's an absolute steal, guys. I think I'm gonna call her Ruby because she has that really beautiful red velvety hue to her. I love her. What's up, abovers? So tomorrow, on Saturday, they're playing the AFL Grand Finals, which is between the Geelong Cats and the Sydney Swans. And because of that, today they're holding a parade in celebration of the Grand Finals, which is also a state holiday. Oh yeah, so another thing, I'm wearing my Ajax jersey, as you can see, which is red and white, and coincidentally, it matches with the Sydney Swans that are playing in tomorrow's final. So I'm wondering how many people will get it wrong, or maybe if some people will recognize it.
The parade was held at Melbourne Cricket Grounds, or MCG. Here, the players of tomorrow's match were showcased, there was a big event at the main stage to rile all the fans up for tomorrow, there was a concert, and the players and coaches of both teams also had a say. After that, I went home to rest up for tomorrow.
Good day, up abovers. It's Saturday, it's 2 p.m, the weather is beautiful, So I'm headed out to Federation Square to watch the AFL Grand Finals with some of my mates at Federation Square. So see you there.
I went to Fed Square with my mate Karma from Bhutan. Like me, Karma is more into the football that they call soccer over here. Like our football, an Aussie rules match is divided into 2 halves, with a halftime in between. Unlike our football though, you can use your hands, the ball is oval, the field is 2, and the goal consists of 3 poles. If you get the ball between the outer ones, you get 1 point, and between the middle one is 6 points. The game is so different from the football I'm used to. Every other minute there's a goal, every goal there's a commercial, and the score goes up into the high numbers.
So I'm at the MCG now, and if you hadn't heard it yet, the Geelong Cats just completely obliterated the Sydney Swans. So I guess Melbourne is going to be dark blue for a while. Though I'm glad that at least the Victoria club won.
This one will probably be less than a minute. I stuck to draining dragon flags, which are just ultimately really fun, especially if you switch it up with different variations. For example, dragon flag isometrics, negatives, and kicks. Variation is what keeps things interesting and ultimately is gonna motivate you to go out to training. My routines are focused on planche, a pushing exercise, but I figured it needs to be balanced by some pulling exercises anyway, so I sporadically incorporated exercises for the one-arm pull-up into my game. And for the front lever. Just to balance everything out, and to keep it fun. Thanks so much for watching. Your Australian word for the day is Barbie. It's probably not what you think it is. So, Australians like to shorten every word, right? Matter of fact, Australians wouldn't even call themselves Australians. They'd call themselves Aussies. Similarly, you might hear them say brekkie instead of breakfast. And Barbie to refer to a barbecue. Right? So that's what that is. Don't forget to subscribe to learn more about wildfires and about Melbourne. And follow me on my socials to see photos of my adventures. Also visit julzdownunder.com to read frequent blog posts and follow me on my SoundCloud if you like the music I used in these videos. Looks like that's it. See ya!